Hi, I'm delighted to start showing you about your knitted bangles. We're going to start today with the lace bangle, and I'm going to cast on using a provisional cast on and a knit a section, and then show you how to complete your bangle before we finish. So I'm going to start by, I use a knitting belt. This is a thing in Shetland that's very popular. Not everyone uses them now, but a lot of folk do, and it certainly speeds up my knitting, and it's at the stage where I can't knit without a knitting belt. I've used it for so many years, I need the belt. So I'm just going to put it on. I'm right-handed, so I put it on my right side to stabilise my right needle. You can always tell how much weight you've put on or lost by the marks on your knitting belt. Mine's a bit tighter just now. So first of all, I'm going to do a provisional cast on. I've always been a bit scared of this because it involves a crochet hook, and I'm not a crocheter. I'm very definitely a knitter, but I have learned it because it gives a lovely way of finishing your bangles. So you make a loop as normal. I'll show you that again because I did it automatically without thinking. You put one side over and then pull the loop through and put that on your crochet hook, and then you hold your hook in front of your needle. In fact, I'm going to swap sides for this one, and take the yarn under your needle and then use the crochet hook to pull it through, and there's your first loop. And then again take your yarn from the front to the back of your needle and then use the crochet hook to pull it through. And you repeat this for the number of stitches that you want on your needle. For this I'm going for 23. That's the number of stitches you use to cast on for this bracelet. I'm here today at Niben in North Maven in Shetland, which is a very popular spot for folk walking. It's the kind of place that Shetlanders come for a day trip because it's such beautiful scenery and it's very accessible. Oh, just checking. "19" I'm at now. You can probably tell I'm not really a crocheter. And then you just crochet a chain to end. and pull it through. And there you have your 23 provisionally cast on stitches. So I'm going to start I'm going to use, this is what we're aiming for. This is the one that's almost finished. I'm going to use this gorgeous mulberry. It's one of my favourite colours. So I'm going to find it in my basket. And we're also using old gold. This is another favourite of mine. And I think it's cyclamen. And also clover. The heather in Shetland is just beautiful at this time of year. It's the end of August and it's breathtaking. And this colour was inspired by some heather that I saw in the hills. There's so many pinks and purples. It's hard to get all the colours, but this is one, maybe on a kind of duller day, this is how the heather would look, and on brighter days it's more pink. So this is the colours I'm choosing. I'm going to start with the mulberry. There are some seagulls fighting behind me, so if you were here you would hear them fighting. Probably one of them's punched one of them's fish. So the first row is a plain knit row. Now, following your chart, you have 1, 2, 3 plain stitches, and then 3 2 togethers. And then in Shetland lace knitting, or in all lace knitting, if you want a stable edge, then if you lose stitches by taking 2 together, then you have to create stitches in some way. So I've taken 2 together, so I've lost 3 stitches. So I'm going to create 3 by doing what we call it cast ups, but the English I think is yarn forward, but it would be, in my head, it's cast up, knit 1, cast up, knit 1, cast up, knit 1. Now I'm going to do that again. So at the moment I've equalised it, I've taken away 3, I've made 3. I'm going to make another 3, cast up, knit 1, cast up, knit 1, cast up. Now I'm going to do 3 together to stabilise it again. This time I'm knitting through the back of the loops. The first row, the first few I knit it through the front of the loops, and that just creates an angle with the stitch. I'll speak more about that in a minute. So orally you would probably say 2 together, 2 together, 2 together, or 2 together 3 times, and that loses you 3 stitches, and I've got knit 3 to the end. When you do your 2 togethers, if you do it just normal 2 together, so you put your needle in and you take it into the front stitch, you take the 2 stitches together, then the stitches are going to angle to the right. but when you go, after you've done a cast up, if you go and knit them through the back, then the stitches angle away from the hole. So you get a shape, it's more shapely. To be honest, I think in the past a lot of Shetland knitters didn't do that unless they were doing the really fine lace. They just knit it two together, just as fast as they could. The faster the method, the better. I don't mind what you do, as long as you do two together and cast ups in equal quantity. I don't care. And it's all in your pattern too. So now I'm going to do a plain row, plain knit row. You can see I'm coming to where the cast up is. I just knit that as normal. Now I'm going to join in my next colour, which is this beautiful clover. It doesn't always work to get an end from the middle of these balls, but you can always, that's not working at all this time, but you can always wrap it around. It's proper stuck this time. There we go. I can wrap that later. So for this I'm not tying it on, I'm just holding it on, and I'll sew the ends in at the end. So I'm going to do another plain row. The Shetland lace, it's always garter stitch. There's never any stocking stitch in Shetland lace, and it's a way that you can distinguish whether something in the past has been made in Shetland, because it was always garter stitches used, and simply because it's faster. A lot of, well, all the knitting at that time was made to sell, or it was made for survival really. So although they made garments for themselves too, the speed was of the essence, and they had to knit to survive. Even when they were going to fetch the peats to warm their house and light their fire, which they used for cooking as well as for heat, then they would be knitting. You can see photos of them, the women knitting, and if you look closely at the photos, then it's socks that they're knitting. They're knitting small items in the round, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands of socks sold out of Shetland, because Shetland was such a centre for trade and ships. Then socks was a very big part of that, and in the families too, they needed socks to keep their feet warm. It does get really cold here in the winter. Now I've knitted one row with this colour, and I'm just going to check my chart because I'm forgotten where I am. I can see I need to do 2 rows and then I do the pattern row. When you get your chart, then I've done it in the colours that I'm using today, but when I personalise your chart, then I'll do the colours that is going to suit you and your style. So I'm happy to do another plain row. I love plain rows. And I think these bangles are great too, because if you live somewhere that's really hot, I know some folk complain because they can't wear Shetland wool because it's too hot, but bangles are fine. You can wear bangles. It's funny for us people coming here and complaining about it being too hot, because sometimes it's very cold here. But today it's a beautiful day. Beautiful and warm, but still a bit windy. Right, so I'm on to a pattern row again. So I'm going to do 3 plain stitches, and then 3 2-togethers. You'll notice when I do my 2 together, I pull the knitting down a bit. That makes it easier to get the needle in. 2 together, and then I'm going to do 6 cast ups. I did cast up, knit 1, cast up, knit 1, cast up, knit 1. So there was 6 cast ups, and then I'm doing 2 together through the back of the loops. Again, pulling the knitting down to make it easier. And then I'm going to do 1 plain row before I change colour again. Now you can see the holes that's being made. If I show you on this white, you'll see it better. You can see where I've done the cast ups, or the yarn forward, or wool over, yarn over, then you're getting that lovely holes. This pattern is a variation of old shell. I have a theory about this, the name for this, because I think that we, in Shetland dialect, we call a shawl a shawl. I've got my shawl. And I wonder if it's been a spelling mistake at some point, and somebody from Shetland has called it an old shall, and they've written it down as shall, and then somebody's looked at it and thought, oh, that could be shell, could be somebody in Shetland saying shell. So then the patterns have come to be known as old shell and new shell. And then sometimes folk thought it was called shale, but shale is not a word that we would use in Shetland. So that's my theory anyway, that it actually was the pattern came from an old shawl rather than being anything to do with a shell. But there's an awful lot of things like that in Shetland where the dialect has gotten mistranslated, lost in translation, I think you could say. Right, so now I'm on to this beautiful cyclamen, and I'm not going to go for the middle this time. I'm going to take the band off and go for the outside edge. And start by knitting my 2 plain rows. You can hear that lovely scrunch when I put my needle into my knitting belt. It's because the knitting belts are full of horse hair. It would be hair taken from the horse's mane or the horse's tail, and it was used to stuff. Whoa! It is a bit windy here today. All my things are blown away. It's used to stuff the knitting belts, and at one time it would have been used to stuff cushions and mattresses and things, but thankfully it's only used now for knitting belts. This is my lace row. In Shetland we would call that either a lissy ging or a holly ging. There's two ways that folk would say it. It kind of varies, the dialect varies across Shetland too, so not only do we have our own words, there's different pronunciation depending on what part you come from. Mostly everyone would call their knitting needles their wires. Sometimes it's pronounced wares, but it's generally everybody would call it their mackin wires, and the belt is the mackin belt. So if you have a look, you can see each section, we've got 4 rows of colour. You've got your 2 plain rows to begin with, then your holly ging or your lacy row, and then a plain row after. And then we'll change colour again. And this is one of my favourite colours, which is old gold. And I think it blew away, so I'm going to have to find it. Here it is. It's not blown far away, for a mercy. And this is such a lovely, beautiful, rich colour. I think it's a tricky colour in some ways. You need a really bright colour to go with it. It's lovely with splash, or it's lovely with this mulberry. You kind of need an equally rich colour. And it's good with white or kind of light colours too. But there's a richness about this colour that I just love. And it's very autumnal. If you think of Shetland Hills in the autumn, very like this colour. You can tell by watching me that I'm a thrower. I've knitted like this since I was about 4. I know the continental knitting style is much more efficient and much faster because I've got a longer journey to go with my thread around each stitch, but this is ingrained in my in my head, and I envy folk that can do it with their left hand, but I've not managed to perfect that myself. So this is the last time I'm going to show you the lace stitch. So I've done like 2 plain rows in old gold, and I'm going to do 3 plain for this side. By plain I just mean a knit stitch. That's another Shetland. Dad, I'm sorry, I was never remembering it. It's just knit. So knit, 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 and then 2 together, 2 together, 2 together, which was all done through the front of the loops. And then cast up, knit 1, 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 cast up. And this time, instead of doing knit 1, you go 2 together through the back of the loops, and that gives you that slanting stitch. No more cast ups, just 3 2 togethers, one after the other. And then you should have 3 plain stitches at the end. Now dear, you have your... Oh, sorry, the wind has come up a bit. It's coming and going today. It's either flat calm 1 minute and then really windy the next. So you repeat this a further 4 more times, and then I'll show you what you do when you get that done. Again, my one blew away, so I found it on the ground. So this is your pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times all together. And you take your knitted bangle, and we're going to wrap it around this knitted bangle, but first of all we're going to graft it together. Because it's garter stitch, we're going to do a garter stitch graft. I've got my grafting needle here, it hasn't blown away, and I'm going to use some mulberry, but excuse me while I find my mulberry. Because I forgot to leave a long enough tail when I did my bangle, when I did my knitting earlier on. So I'm going to use mulberry to graft. I've picked up my original stitches from the cast on, and then this was my final row. So I'm going to fix this in. First of all, I'm going to go purlwise in the front. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to wrap all this tails inside. And this needle is on the wrong way round. So I'm going to flip this over. Because we use knitting belts, we don't usually use needles with knobs on the end because the knitting belt stops the stitches from falling off. But sometimes there's an odd one that creeps in, but that's why I got caught out with it being on the wrong side. So we're going to be grafting the sides together now, the edges, the short edges of your bangle. I've got a long piece of mulberry, and I'm going to be starting by fixing by doing a purl stitch on the front and then a plain stitch on the back, just pulling the yarn through. Right, so now I'm going to do plain and slip the needle off and then go in purlwise into the next stitch on the front needle. So I'm doing plain, slip, purl, and then the same on the back needle, plain, slip, purl. And then plain, slip, purl. I'm only going in purl and pulling the wool through. In Shetland we call this wusset. Any yarn we call wusset, which probably comes from the word worsted, but it's a shortened form. So back to the grafting. I'm going on the back needle now, plain, slip, purl, and on the front needle, plain, slip, purl. And before I started this, I checked that I had 23 needles on each, 23 stitches on each needle. Plain, slip, purl on the front, and then plain, slip, purl on the back. lovely seeing a pretty boat going by. If there's birds following it, then it's a sign that they've got fish. And I know I'm at the last 2 stitches. I'm just going into the front one plain, stitching into the back one plain too, and I'll join them together. And put a simple knot to fix them. Now you've got your bangle all joined together now. The next stage is to turn it outside in and to sew in all these ends. They don't have to be perfectly sewed because this is going to be the inside of the bangle, but they just have to be fixed so they're not going to break away. You could actually tie them too. That's going to make it a lot quicker. Just find 2 ends and tie them together. So that's going to be sewn in the inside of the bangle, so you're not going to see it. If this was a scarf or a jumper I was knitting, then I would take a lot more care with my ends. But because it's a bangle and it's going to be felted and you're not going to see the inside, then I think it's okay to cheat a bit and do it a faster way. Nearly there. I think that's back where I started. So I'm going to trim these ends because I don't want a bulky piece. So I'm just going to get my scissors from my basket and trim the ends. But I'll leave a long one to sew it together. Now I'm going to put the bangle onto put the knitted piece onto the wooden bangle. Then using my grafting needle I'm going to sew it together. You want the edges to be on the outside to make it easier for you to sew. And you want to try and join up the coloured strips. Join up the coloured strips so that your bangle looks good inside and outside. It matches. Don't worry about your sewing being too perfect because you're going to put it in the washing machine and felt it. So the inside is not going to be seen. And you can poke in that ends and knots as you go. I had these bangles specially made because the wooden ones that I could buy were too small for a lot of folks' hands. So I got ones specially made so that they were chunky but also a bit wider. So when you covered them with knitting, then folk are still able to wear them. And because they're going in the washing machine, then they have to be fully sealed with varnish, which these ones are, so that they don't split when they go in the machine. And when you're finished, in the UK we would put it into a 60-degree wash, which is a hot wash, and I put it in with a couple of towels and your normal soap powder, and then your bangle will felt. It's a great way to use up ends of wool too. If you have any ends of yarn, then it's a good way of using them up and making something that matches whatever you've been knitting. Nearly there now. And then just tie a knot in the end to secure it. Just a simple knot and run the thread through. And cut it close to the bangle. And then turn it so the pattern is on the outside, and the same you've just sewn is on the inside. And when you take it and put it in your washing machine, then it gets a lovely soft texture on it. So this will turn in slightly different colours, but you'll get the idea. It'll felt to be this lovely fuzzy soft bangle. I hope you enjoy knitting your lace bangle, and if you have any questions at all, then please feel free to email me. Thank you.